All good, thank you. Right, so let's open this Risk and Insurance Committee meeting with the opening Karakia. Right, welcome everybody, particularly to our newly elected members. I've met a couple of you previously. Welcome again, Jane. I don't think we've actually met yet. Sure. Welcome. So just for everyone's completeness, my philosophy as chair this time is we've got members of the committee who can move and second items, but in terms of other elected members around the table, I'm more than happy that you participate in asking questions. All I just ask is that you don't move and second, otherwise I get confused and vote when it comes to passing resolutions. So welcome everybody. Apologies, I'll just note that we've got an apology from member Marty. Can I have a mover, please? Mayor Steve, do I have a seconder? Councillor Jane, all those in favour, please say aye. It's carried, thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? There are none noted. We don't have a public forum. So the first item, and we welcome Stefan from Audit New Zealand on the screen. Welcome. We've got on page 6, we've got the Audit New Zealand report. Mark, you want to come up to the table as well? Thank you. We'll take your report, both Mark and Stefan, as read. And maybe, Stefan, if you've got any... Stefan, my apologies. Stefan, thank you. My apologies. Take your report as read. Is there any key highlights or key issues you want to bring to the elected members and the committee's attention?
Sure, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that the key things there in terms of the focus areas and the audit plan, the things that got addressed, that addressed the qualification in the previous year's audit opinion and annual report, have now been addressed, and I recommend that the methodology that had been applied in getting those addressed continue to be applied, because I think that would serve Council's interest best, because it has actually passed the test. That would be the one message that I have in regards to the report that I've got there.
Thank you. Mark, have you got anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's just thanks to really Sefton and the team and members from council, the team from council, and what was, I believe, a successful audit at the end of the day, and a really great outcome in terms of removal of the qualifications. And I think paving the way forward in terms of due process. I think it was a successful outcome at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the elected members on this report? Deputy Mayor Grace, have you got any questions? I'm sure you've got some there. You can leave.
I mean, I have something, won't I? Just the question I had for you, Stefan, was with regards to the qualifications. You'd mentioned in one of our earlier workshops, or maybe to council, that you were able to look back in history and remove the qualification as well now that we have complied. The expectation is that going forward, the evidence that has been provided will be sufficient as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's what I just opened up with. The methodology that had been applied to provide the evidence, say for the investment in Castle Rock, the methodology that had been applied there by PwC can be applied by council come the end of the year and again hold that position so that the qualification does not make a reappearance. Similarly, with the survey, residence survey, the methodology that would apply was robust, it was peer reviewed, and if council can continue, management continue to apply that methodology with the same sort of stringent exercise of actually reviewing that itself, it should actually pass the enable council to continue to make sure that those issues do not re-emerge. And I think I just wanted to point out that the issue around Castle Rock, that was why we requested with management that it be the adoption of the financial statement or the annual report be moved one day, just so that we could actually get that across the line as well. So just in case, just for notification.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yep. I had a question with regards to risk pool, but it might be more to Jeff and yourself. Are you able to just talk a little bit about the potential risk with risk pool and what the call for money from councils looks like and how that sits on our minds in terms of risk?
Yes. So risk pool was a conglomerate of councils that got together to pool risk for a above ground asset, and in particular where we had consenting processes, building consenting processes. Risk pool was defended, was named in a court case with Napier City Council, where a leaky building was taken, a developer or owners took Napier City Council to court over the leaky building, and that case was lost. And what the case identified was that the issue is essentially where there are multiple insurance or multiple failures of a building structure at the same time. So not just a weatherproofing failure, but also a cladding failure or a different sort of failure at the same time. And the case resulted eventually with risk pools stopping providing cover. But when they stop providing cover, that does not immediately remove all of the liability for the cover that they have provided in the previous years. So those cases have been through the courts in New Zealand and are still going through the courts. Behind that, the insurer, who was based in London, did not fund their portion of that insurance. And so the calls that are being made on councils who were providing coverage under risk pool to fund a legal case against the insurer to get them to pay for their portion that they had, councils believed they had covered. So that's the case. We are a very small part of the risk pool client, being a small council, but proportionally we do still share our part of the costs to chase that recovery through the English legal system now, not just through the New Zealand legal system.
Thank you. Any other questions? The team would be disappointed if I didn't have some. Just on page 16 of the agenda, page 10 of your report, we've got a question there on, I've got a question on the judgment made, and it's in just clarification. You're saying the fair value of private equity is optimistic, and so it's not a misstatement, but it's bordering, it's moving the scale, you can see my hands, right, towards the higher end, right? Just, have you got any comments on that? Is that just where you think council is sitting, and what's the rationale for that?
Yeah, sure. That's exactly it. I think that's where council has actually ended up in terms of the fair value of its assets as at the 30th of June. The analysis which council or management provided indicated that it was probably on the higher side of the scale, not misstated, but just on the higher side of the scale. So because we haven't got audited information and it's based on an historical analysis, the conservative or as best as we could assess that it is probably a little bit optimistic, but not optimistic enough to be a misstatement.
Thank you. And I've got just the next page over, just clarification over your expectations. And I think this is really positive, right? The fact that we've got some acceptables and some goods. We don't apparently have any attention required, which is very good, Mr. Chief Executive. Can you just comment on particularly the item where some of the internal borrowings didn't comply with GAAP, and also the grant accrual didn't comply with GAAP? Can you just explain that to the lay people in the room?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of reporting, we report to accounting standards, and one of the, for the very first one, in terms of internal borrowings, you may have internal borrowings, but in terms of reporting to an externally, you don't have to report, or you don't report internal borrowings, and so that was actually there originally, and so by going through the new fresh set of eyes that had been reported in the past, it was therefore discussed with management, and that was removed, taken out. The other one regarding the revenue accrual, it is a timing and a cut-off issue in terms of the recognition of a grant revenue from MB in relation to the water project.
Yeah.
It was effectively complete, but one of the conditions that would enable it to be recognised had not been met, and therefore that revenue had to be reversed. So when we looked into it, and council looked into it as well, they agreed that that was probably recognised a little bit early, but it's just a timing thing. And so that probably better explained by management as to where it sits at the moment. But that's because of the accounting rules and the requirement that the conditions be met. It was therefore the accrual was reversed. Revenue accrual was reversed.
Okay.
May I?
Yeah, absolutely.
The observation on this particular one is quite interesting. So normally you would have a principle of matching, where you have revenue that matches your expenditure, and you try and put those same in the same accounting period. But in this case, the IFRS or the GAAP rules mean that we were unable to match the expenditure which had occurred, capital expenditure which had occurred on the processed water project in the June year, with the revenue that we anticipate to receive from that, which, because we hadn't reached practical completion, was unable to be accrued into the same year that we had the expenditure. So the revenue will show up in the next fiscal year, which is we reach practical completion roughly 3 weeks later. So it was a small timing difference, and the matching principle is normally what you would see, but in this case, because we hadn't reached practical completion, we were unable to accrue that revenue.
Thank you. And my last question is, I note that, and I think I had a email from Jerry yesterday that normally you would give a detailed management letter update. I understand that that's still coming, and I utterly understand the pressures that Audit New Zealand are under. I think there's at least a couple, well, maybe not yours, but I'm sure there's at least one or two councils that still haven't actually got their audit opinion across the line yet. So can you just give us an update when council can expect that? No pressure.
Yeah, I think
it will come to the next committee meeting, which is until the new year, but just for completeness. Thank you.
Yes, we're just working on the summary annual report at the moment for council. That should be out later this week. We will then have the debenture trust limited assurance, which follows the annual audit and must be completed within a month. So we've just set our priorities that way, and then we will get the detailed report out certainly this month, or certainly before Christmas. Christmas is a bit too far away. This month, we will get that report out, detailed report to management.
Thank you. And just my final comment, I assume because of the other comments, there's no major concerns that need to be brought to this committee's attention in the management letter.
That's correct, Chair. In fact, I would just like to point out that on the last page of those gradings, about the issues raised in the previous report being addressed in a timely manner. If there was a grade better than good, I think that the recommendations that we had there about the resident survey and the assessment of investment, support for investment, they were really well taken care of by management. So there's no surprises if you call it. You should be rising going forward, or in the report to come.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sefton. I'm very grateful for that feedback, and I know the team worked very, very hard on that, and we really appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. And I just reinforce that auditors are trained not to give higher comment than good or satisfactory. Right? It's brainwashed out of us. So I've had to relearn my terminology since I've left the audit profession.
Satisfactory, I think, is what is drummed into you, isn't it?
That is correct.
Right. Any further questions or comments before we go to the recommendation? We've got a recommendation there on page 6. We received the report. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Grace. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Steve Lawrence, seconded. All those in favour? No further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Might see you this afternoon.
Thank you very much. See you this afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Next item, 6.2 on page 21. Is it Jeff or Mark who are going to handle this one in Jerry's absence?
I'm happy to work through with Jeff's support.
Thank you. All right.
We've got the risk management update. I take it as the report as read. It sort of identifies some of the emerging risks and what's been done to sort of mitigate those, and sort of covered the bases around various aspects, local body elections, the annual report, the combined district plan, organisational changes. There's some legislative changes that have taken place, and the new council that's come on board. There's also the framework for the risk register, which I guess there's not much change or movement since the last tabling of the risk register, and that will probably be an area for review for council with the committee going forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Any questions or comments on the report?
I just had a question just about how the risk register is constructed, whether there's, do we use probability models or probability analysis? How do we come to these risks?
Absolutely. We use an assessment tool that looks at the mitigations that we have in place and whether or not those mitigations can effectively do what they state they are proposing to do. So we don't have a particular probability model or matrix. It's really officer judgment on the mitigations. We do document the mitigations that we have in place for the particular risks that we are, the various strategic risks or other risks that we're monitoring. Happy to debate the mitigations, I think, is probably the, because that's probably where we understand the risks a whole lot better, is where we discuss and have a conversation or debate the mitigation that is in place and whether or not that is an effective mitigation.
Chief Executive, I can what I suggest is maybe in the new calendar year that we actually have a workshop, particularly on risk, and actually pull apart in the nicest possible way council's overall approach to risk, the risk register, and also some of these emerging risks, because I think the emerging risks are going to increase dramatically in the foreseeable future. But because risk is about uncertainty, we live in local government at the moment, there's huge uncertainty about future legislation that has been promised but not yet delivered, right? And what it actually means for our residents and ratepayers around delivery of services and the outcomes, etc. I think that's very much going to be a very fast-moving target in the new year. So that's what I would be recommending to the Chief Executive and to Council, that you hold quite a detailed workshop, because this is the basis of this committee. It's about understanding risks and have we got the appropriate mitigation. The Chief Executive has said, have we got the appropriate mitigation in place, but also have we actually identified all our risks?
Yeah.
Because that's what keeps me awake at night. It's the risks that we should know about that we don't know about.
I think that was what my question was about how we identify the risks and if there's a structure around that. So okay.
I think this is with unfortunately, timing's not great at the moment with a whole lot of other things. Paul Marks, not only the final annual report over the line, is also new to council, so he needs to get his feet under the table and work out, but also we've got a change in elected members, so that automatically changes your risk appetite. So what do we actually mean by risk appetite? What I mean with risk appetite will be very much different to you, which will be very much different to the existing councillors. Well, sorry, to the returning councillors, I should say, the repeat offenders. So, I think that's really important. What I'd like to do is really concentrate on some of the emerging risks. Fortunately, local body elections, I think that's, we didn't have a judicial recount, unlike one or two other councils, or even an application for a judicial recount. So that's, I think, the limit. The risk is gone for another 2 years until we do the whole process again. But I really want to talk about, the committee and maybe the staff to talk about 5.2 in the report, the local water done well. And that to me is, there's a lot of work to do. And when there's a lot of work to do, that comes with significant risk. And maybe, Mr. Chief Executive, you want to just unpick that risk about there, particularly about the continued water services, assurance that the water will actually be there, right? It's and about what it actually means for the council and the current ratepayers?
Sure. I'll start with Carterton,
Yeah.
and then perhaps expand a little bit into the water entity. The risk for Carterton is that we are unable to continue to provide drinking water, which is, you know, an essential service along with wastewater supply. And we've mitigated that risk as much as possible with an in-house team. So we aren't reliant on contractors externally. We have an in-house team, and we cross-train that in-house team in terms of being able to manage drinking water supply. Now, within an in-house team, you do end up with concentration of some of that risk. So, for example, we have water treatment plant operators who can operate our plant, and they need to be certified, but we don't have an unlimited number of certified water treatment plant operators. So that provides a risk. We can augment that risk by bringing new people through, training them, or by potentially joining up with other councils who do have certified staff. But we are working sufficiently at the moment. We've got sufficiently qualified staff to manage both during the day and after hours. So as far as we're concerned, we don't see a significant risk in continuing to do what we have been doing for the past decades. The challenge when we move up into a wider entity does change a little bit because of the structure of how you deliver. So as the Waipa or Wairarapa Tararua Water Services entity takes over, it may deliver in a different manner, i.e. there could be outsourced services with other councils that are being brought in-house. And it is that change period where you move from one provider to a different provider where you run a greater risk of a disruption to service. I wouldn't say a failure of service. I suspect potentially the worst it might be is a disruption to service. But in this case, we've got an internal resource who's contracted via South Y that the four councils are providing, a project manager. She is currently building a team around her to manage the transition, and we will, the CEs are across that, and the stakeholder forum will also be across what's going on there. Our plan is to deliver, first and foremost, a minimum viable product, and that minimum viable product is our existing services as they're being delivered today. So that's drinking water, that's wastewater as the two priority, and that's management of stormwater and those effects. And then we add on top of that capital planning and progressive works, where we add out, and then structure, corporate governance, et cetera, that goes in on top. But the minimum viable product that we must deliver, and we will deliver on the 1st of July 2027, is the existing services that we are providing today. So it is a risk. It remains a risk, and particularly a risk as we transfer a risk to disruption. But I believe we are mitigating that risk through the use of planning, project planning, and additional resources.
I also had a potential risk that I think should be listed under the local water done well. There's not a bullet point sort of talking about the risk of this plan being derailed in the next 18 months between now and July 1st, where we have 4 new mayors across the 4 councils, and I think 4 new deputies as well. So we've just got a whole new change of leadership across these councils. I feel like there should be a note in there saying there's a risk of minds being changed and new councils having a different direction, and I just feel like not having that listed in the risk is potentially an oversight.
It's a fair comment. The legislation provides for a water services delivery plan to be changed. Obviously, we don't lock it in forever in a day and it becomes concrete. So there has to be a process to change the plan, and the legislation does provide that. It is, as my recollection, is it's a 2-step consultation process. So there is a consultation about what is proposed to be changed, and then there is a consultation on the changing of the water services delivery plan. So it's, as opposed to a long-term plan consultation, which is a single consultation, I think the water services one is a two-step. But there is a process to change that, and the shareholder agreement also provides for the entry of new players and the exit of some players. So it is provided for, and I think you're absolutely right. It is a risk with a change in 4 councils. I'm happy to add that to the risk register.
Would it be a very low risk though, because of what's in the shareholder agreement and the councils having to agree for that council, the other 3 councils having to agree for that council to exit?
Sounds like a governance decision around the level of risk.
Next year.
I had a couple of other ones.
Keep going. Yeah.
With the combined district planned, this might be a question for Solly. How long is the statutory appeal hearing got left on it?
Week and
nothing at this point?
there has been one appeal.
Thank you. Yeah. Any more? Is that? Oh,
No,
while you
you
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just under 5.1, the team is going to be discussing the issue raised regarding the publication of nominators' details. I'm just wondering if any feedback's been provided from Election NZ. But I've also got a question to add to that, and that's regarding the marked roll. And there's been changes to the marked roll that's available to any elected representative to ask for, and that changes have been made to how that is or what's included in those details that are provided to elected representatives. So my question is, have Election NZ just made those changes to what's the details provided in the marked roll, or has that come from government as to what's those changes that they've made?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I will take an action. They're good questions. I don't know whether that's come from Elections NZ or the government.
Because it just raises more questions for me as how much control Election NZ have over these changes.
I am conscious that the question around nominations is something that has bugged us, and I think I might have mentioned previously that we were less than satisfied, let's use an audit phrase, with some of the feedback we had from our nominated electoral officer from Elections NZ, and I was considering sending them a letter. So I will do some investigation on the mark roll and also draft a letter to go to them. There were a few issues that I would have hoped we could have had more support on, and that's some of them.
Okay, while you've got the floor, keep going.
Also have a question around the legislative changes and just which is 5.6, and just the wording in there around government's refocus of the purpose of councils to provide for good quality local infrastructure in a most cost-effective way. I'm just interested in thoughts of the chair or Jeff, just in how that could possibly remove the democratic process of the community being involved in us consulting with them as to how much money we might want to spend on a particular project, what level of, let's say, hypothetically pipes, and we decide to put in there's an option of putting a 300 mil pipe in or a 400 mil pipe in, or a concrete 400 mil pipe or a poly 400 mil pipe, just if they're saying we have to do it in the most cost effective way, to me, that's taking away the opportunity for community to look at future proofing for generations to come.
Do you want?
I'm happy to answer, Chair, but if you wish to, please. Comment first.
Comment. I think the issue is my since you asked me, cost effective, in my opinion, means you've got to consider the whole of life costs. And I can give you a personal example. So I bought a belt from a rather cheap store, and the weekend I threw it out because it only lasted me a couple of years. Right, a belt I had bought quite expensive, would be 20 years ago, is in still good condition. Right, so that's what we actually mean by good. Right, and it's not just buying. What do we mean by cost effective? It's got to be over the life of the asset. You can't just go and buy. Be careful here. I was going to say go down to your local Kmart and buy something there, because it may not actually, be careful here, it may not last, right? Compared with buying a better quality product. But I think what the government want us to do is actually to think about, we're actually got to look at the total cost, and is that actually cost effective? It's not saying is not gold plated, right? I don't need a gold plated belt, right? I need a cost effective belt that'll keep my trousers up, that will actually last a relatively long period of time. So I won't have to keep on buying a new belt every couple of years. And I think that's what it actually, that's my interpretation of what they mean. And again, the government actually haven't specified that, and they've probably been deliberate. So to me, is they will be monitoring how cost effective we're actually being, and then there will be those who are not being cost effective maybe held to account. But I think the issue is, and I think when you actually look at, and I'm looking through the legislation here, it's more about the purpose of local government. Right? When they have changed it, they're now in the draft in the bill, they have defined what they believe are core services. Where this current government's focus is, they're not very happy about the warm and fuzzies, for want of a better word, that some councils, not all councils, right, have actually been spending some of their money and time. And I think that's, to me, is where the focus is. So I don't think the government have got an intention that we should actually be only putting in infrastructure or services that will ultimately cost the ratepayer over the life of the asset significantly, because that's not good quality. Mr. Chief Executive?
It's just to add to that, it's probably where various councils have contracts or partnerships with local companies as well. It's who are providing a service to us at a certain cost. And how will that be measured? How will the weighting be? How will we decide whether that's going to fit into a government?
So, that's a very good question. No idea, right? But to me is potential risk that you've got a buy local, right? And you are prepared as a council to pay a 15% margin for buying local. And is that cost effective? Right? And I don't know the answer because I really haven't given it much thought, to be honest, but thank you. My take on it is, what do we mean by it's got to be effective for the residents?
Households
and businesses. So you could actually say, by buying local, it's actually being effective for local businesses. And I think just taking a very narrow, it's got to be just one. There are other legs that you should be considering. But yes, very valid points that I think council needs to consider and do its own assessment against those principles and say, how have we actually met those principles? And if you don't meet the principles, so then I think then you've got some major risks. Anything?
I know we've got a combined council forum coming up in 2 weeks, and Simpson Grierson will be attending that combined council forum. And I know this is one of the topics that they've talked on previously. They've advised both the government and a number of councils on the interpretation of the purpose of local government. And I strongly encourage elected members to attend that session, because I firmly believe they will pick up this issue in a nutshell and walk us through what they think it means for councils. Now, what I'd like to do is just preempt that with a couple of things. Firstly, good quality local infrastructure, public services and regulatory functions in a manner that is cost effective, but supporting economic growth and development. So that if I take that apart, that means when I listen to the minister, they use the example of some of the roads that have been built, and they said it's a beautiful road, lovely, smooth, perfect, does exactly what it needs to. Do we need millions of dollars worth of plants on the side of the road? So is that good quality and cost effective? I mean, you can still have a road without plants. You've delivered the outcome. I think that's potentially where they're looking. But also that supporting local economic growth and development gives us the opportunity to take the pipe that was there and expand it to cater for future economic growth. What I think we will need to do is change the way we evaluate our procurement and the way we tender our work to make sure that we understand what lawyers are saying, what Simpson Grierson suggests we consider, and make sure that it doesn't adversely affect the way that we are driving our investment in local infrastructure and local businesses. So first port of call, I'll listen to Simpson Grierson. I encourage you to, in 2 weeks' time, let's take a lead from them and also consider how we continue our procurement in this space to make sure we fit the purpose of local government, but also encourage local investment.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Yeah, that's way better than me. He should have gone first. All right. Any further questions?
I have a comment, but I've got a question.
I just had one question with regards to, you've listed a couple of the different legislative changes that are of particular interest.
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah, a few. I wonder if there's any there that are particularly time sensitive that you could flesh out a little bit? Is there any particular concern?
So look, I think the Resource Management Act, I don't want to understate the Resource Management Act changes. I think they will be quite significant and quite material for us coming up. There's been a lot of suggestion from the government that regional council have potentially focused on a very narrow part of the Resource Management Act, being the environment, and not looking at the economic aspects of development or the cultural or the societal impacts of. So they've focused very narrowly, and they've also, in some cases, appear to have stepped beyond the national standards or the government policy statements with requirements that are greater than the government policy statement. So I suspect the government's looking at that very closely, and I know that work around regional council could be quite material. My thinking is that may also impact us in terms of our regulatory functions, and I'm just really conscious that we have some additional regulatory functions around planning, spatial planning, around building and consenting and that kind of thing. I'd just keep a watching brief on that before Christmas would be my view.
Not a question, just a comment really on the emerging risks that you've listed here. None of them I find particularly disturbing. I know with a lot of uncertainty about local water done well, and certain times age pick that out of our agenda to write about. The legislative changes is what concerns me, and particularly so much we don't know. Rates capping future of regional councils, whole raft of things. So that's
Chrome buildings, granny flats, you know.
Yep.
yeah. So that's my comment. That 5.6 is where we need to be focused in terms of what's in front of us here.
Also the one we can do the least about though.
And,
So it's a
and
tricky one.
Yes.
and it's likely to happen very fast. You know, the takeout I've had from this coalition government is that legislation changes very quickly. So
I just have one comment, Mr. Chair, and it's just around 5.5. I just want to make a very positive comment towards the executive leadership team for I know how difficult it is, and we are being told that we are very tight with staff, that we run things on a shoestring type of thing. But I just really want to thank them for looking into their own structures and conducting a review and deciding whether or not to replace staff who decide to leave the organisation. I'm just very grateful for that.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments before we move to the recommendation on page 24? That the recommendation is the committee receives the report. Do I have a mover? That was Mayor Steve by a finger. All right. Do I have a seconder? Oh, no seconders. I'll second it. All right. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Next item is 6.3, our work plan on page 42.
So the work plan based on, I guess what's tabled is the framework that was in existence last year, and we've just sort of annotated some changes for consideration for the year going forward. Tables have been populated very similar to last year with a couple of additions, and just for comments and consideration by the committee, I guess.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Mayor Steve.
I'll just make it frame.
Yeah, well, no one else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering whether in the work plan, we should be adding in consideration of the catchment plan for the Mangatiriri stream and the potential flood risks for Carterton.
It's worth noting.
Can I clarify? Is this committee the right place, or would policy and projects be a better place to hold that action? And the reason I ask, Mayor, is because policy and projects may be able to do something about it.
It was more around just we're looking at our work plan, just like looking at risk, the risk side of things for council, and to me, a flood through the Mangatiriri is quite a risk that we should actually look at. So probably both, really.
Just going back to the idea of reviewing or having a workshop on the risk register. I wonder if that could be in addition to the work plan for early next year, because I thought that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs. I think it's sort of there, isn't it?
We've got it in February as a risk framework review, and it probably entails sorts of register as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I gather the risk framework review will be undertaken just before the insurance review. I see that kind of written in the same period. Just it'd be good to know everyone's level of risk, and then we can put that into how we
Ensure.
work through insurance.
Yeah. Yep. Very minor issue. We haven't received the audit update, so that should actually, well, it's in for the November meeting. It probably should also be carried forward to the February one as well, so the council formally receives it as well. Just noting that. I think I'm going to be provocative. I wonder, towards the end of next calendar year, in the November, in 12 months' time, once you've got your feet under the table committee, whether it's actually appropriate for you to do a partial review of how effective the committee is in terms of risk, as a sort of a self-monitoring assessment, saying, are we doing what we should be doing, and as a formal process, and maybe that could actually be added into the November-December period. I think, particularly in the light of what the Chief Executive has just said, there's significant change coming with legislation. The whole risk profile could get turned on its head very, very quickly. And I think it would be appropriate to actually signal, have we actually got the right terms of reference? Are we doing the right things in terms of the risks identification, the role of this committee going forward? Would be a strong recommendation that I would be making.
I also just wondered if towards the end of next year, as we're getting closer to things actually really shifting in the organisation with staff in terms of local water, if there should be a section that's specifically about local water and how we're transitioning and how that's all running smoothly, because rather than it fitting into one of these, I wonder if it should be its own designated. It'll be our attention for most things at that point, I imagine.
I agree with you, Deputy Grace. In fact, that was, I actually looked at that and I think, well, it's there, but should it actually have its own docs?
Yeah.
Right. But I would also say, right, is that the government reform is also going to be significant as well. So, the fact that they're actually grouped together, I agree with you from a priority perspective for the Chief Executive, but I think we're all going to be very much aware. And as we go, as all four councils go through that transition of the three waters, it's going to be very much a focus. And I should.
It's also something we can control.
Yeah.
Yes, the three. Yes.
Our responsibility of staff and that kind of thing just needs to be a focus.
And I should declare us that I actually have been reappointed to Tararua for the 3 years, another 18 months, because that's the way they work on their cycle. So I know this is maybe my last committee meeting. Right? We'll see what is required. That's what I'll say. All right. Anything further on the work plan? So, Mr. Chief Executive, just on Deputy Mayor Grace's comment, do you want that as a separate item, the three waters, or are you comfortable that you'll include it? I think it's going to be.
I think once we go through the framework, it'll be obvious that we want to separate the three waters out, particularly as we get closer towards that. So might not be February, but I think by the time we get to sort of the second half of the year, the calendar year, we'll want to be having quite a lot of focus on less than 12 months to go on that. So I expect it'll be separated out.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further. Any other questions? So again, we've got a recommendation there that we receive the report. Can I suggest we change the recommendation? We endorse, no, it is that reviewed, but I would say it's actually endorses the amended risk and assurance work plan. Just made some changes. Do I have a mover for that? Mayor Steve. Do I second the Councillor Jane? Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Next item, our Treasury report, 6.4 on page 45. Next.
Right, so table is the Treasury report, which I take it as read. I guess that is, I guess, the status quo as we're sitting at the moment. I'd just like to highlight really is that all the borrowing limits and debt funding and interest rates for our portfolios are still within the compliance requirements. So, we work together with PwC in terms of how those are all structured. At the moment, we are within our sort of compliance framework. And I guess me and you on board here will have a look at the structures in conjunction with Jeff as to appropriability of that sort of going forward. So, any questions, I guess, around the report?
On page 48, talks about the forecast position, and it mentions about the idea around making decisions for moving internal debt to the local government financing agency, and how Three Waters is impacted by that. I wonder if you can sort of explain that a little bit to me,
Yes.
how that impacts us.
All right, Jeff, thank you.
I'm happy if you wish to. But I'm happy to walk in.
Yeah, thank you. I think the 7 million relates to the wastewater aspect. Happy for you to.
So the plan with our debt, so we have internal debt and we have external debt with LGFA. We also use some of our spare cash reserves. So we have some cash reserves that we've received, and rather than go and borrow some more money and have some cash reserves, we use those cash reserves up first because it's a whole lot more efficient and cheaper for the ratepayer to do so. So we have internal debt and external debt. When we separate for Wairarapa Tararua Water Services Entity, as the external debt matures and reaches the time where it needs to be repaid, that will transfer over to the new water services entity and move off our books. But that'll probably take some time. So we're not planning on doing the usual, mortgage loan break thing and paying a whole lot of break fees. We're just going to transition that debt over once it falls due. Now, after the go live date, we will obviously charge the water services entity for any interest costs and holding costs of that debt because it's no longer ours, it's theirs. But physically, it won't transfer off our liability or off our books until it falls due. Not so true for internal debt because we could transfer that whenever we wish because it is internal and it's just cash flow. So we'll probably look to transition that internal debt for all four councils over a period of time as the entity is able to borrow and has sufficient cash reserves to do so. So it may be, I expect it would be in the first 12 months we will transition that debt. Again, the interest and holding costs of that internal debt will be charged through to the water services entity, so there won't be any burden left on our internal Carterton's ratepayers for that. But yes, there is a subtly different process for internal debt as opposed to external debt.
And just going back now to the debt that we have at the moment, is that 3 to 7 years? Is that correct? That we've got
falls into a whole bunch of categories.
So it will be quite a while until the debt is off our books.
Yep.
Okay.
So the quantum that we will transfer, round figures,
Is that the 7K?
7 mil. No,
Sorry, the 7 mil was what it says is our internal debt at the moment.
more likely 20.
So that's the water debt involves the internal debt.
Oh, right.
My feeling is it's the vast majority of our current debt. Yes, it's significant. It's more than $20 million.
Yeah. Any other questions? Jeff, I don't think it's going to affect us, but Standard & Poor's came out last week and basically for the councils that have got credit ratings, they will be still looking through, the water services entity to look at the final credit rating. Now, let's back the truck up, right? So the original idea of these new water services entities that they would be standalone, and they'd be standalone from a debt servicing perspective and their own credit standing. However, our good friends Standard & Poor's says, we've actually looked at this and it's still guaranteed by the councils, and therefore, while the water services entity might be having more debt, we're now going to attribute that debt back to the parent council, which may affect the parent council's credit rating. None of the 4 Wairarapa plus T councils are credit rated, so it's not going to affect this council, but potentially it may affect other councils with a downgrade in their credit rating. And I've been talking to some other councils. Some councils are talking a credit rating downgrade of significance that could cost them anything from up to 0.5% increase in their borrowing costs.
Is this a temporary thing? Is this permanent? Because did they know about that when they made the decision to split the water off?
I can't know what the government were thinking. They were hoping that their Standard & Poor's would actually think them as standalone entities, but Standard & Poor's have come out and said, no, we've actually looked at it.
Pulls the rug out of it, doesn't it?
It has pulled the rug out very quickly, and it will be very interesting to see the response that only came out last week before. And they thought, there was a paper which I've got a copy of, and it's very interesting. But interestingly, when they did their announcement, they said Watercare, because it's got legislative standalone status, it won't be affected, won't be affecting Auckland Council. So maybe there's some further amendments
To the legislation.
Legislation coming in due course to once the quantum is actually known, because all Standard & Poor's is, we will do this assessment and we don't know the effect of the potential downgrades and how big the water debt is going to be.
I also didn't know that we didn't have a credit rating. I thought all councils had a credit rating, and yet we're borrowing from LGFA, so we can borrow with impunity.
Oh,
Perhaps I could just clarify Councillor's comments. So there is a cost with a credit rating, and we calculate the cost of the credit rating we calculate the benefit of having a credit rating versus the cost of getting one. The break even is around $50 million worth of external borrowing.
Sure.
And because we're well below that $50 million, there's really not much benefit for us to get a credit rating until we go above that.
It sets the interest rate, doesn't it?
It sets a slightly lower interest rate. And we're talking 0.5%, 0.25%, 20 basis points, 10 basis points. So it doesn't make a material difference to us in our interest rate, and the cost of obtaining a credit rating is quite significant. So we haven't got one, and we probably won't get one. And
across all small councils won't have a credit rating.
So smaller councils with smaller borrowing, we don't have a credit rating, but the benefit occurs above $50 million where you can get a slightly better result. Now, just following on from the Chair's comments around Standard & Poor's, credit rating agencies use history to project forward. So they all like looking backwards over trading history in order to use that to go, well, what's the future going to be like? None of these water entities, apart from Watercare, have a trading history. So I can understand why Standard & Poor's might say, just not sure we're going to use the parent company guarantee, because they have a history. The council's got a history going back over a long period of time that we can use to project forward. I suspect their tune will change as these entities are stood up and begin to have a regular and consistent trading history, revenue, expenditure and capital profile. once that's established and over probably a period of 4 to 5 years, then I suspect you'll find that the Standard & Poor's and rating agencies will begin to let go of the parent and start to just look at the.
But in the meantime, because we don't have a credit rating, we're actually not affected.
Correct.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
So we're not quite impugned.
No, I don't use that word.
It was impunity, but we're not affected, I think.
So I'm not too
Explained.
Yeah, okay. Can I also just quote that also LGFA have their own limits on how much they will lend to an unrated council.
So we're individually rated with them.
Well, not individually grouped, right?
We've grouped.
We're grouped. And also what they deal with this person on a semi-regular basis, that they have their own internal assessor and they will actually go around, they will do their own assessment as to the borrowing risk of each individual council. But they group it from a limit perspective. There is one council in New Zealand that can't borrow from LGFA.
So they're almost insolvent.
They are insolvent.
Okay.
Yeah, and
No.
that's not for our public meeting.
No. It's in the audit. It's in the audit agenda of the council. But so what I'm doing is the assurances that they actually give. Right? They look at each individual council to say, are you doing the right things? So and that's also a good thing if you're a guarantee council, that you've got to give assurance. That's where I look at it, that there's some councils that might have a very high debt, that the other councils are well protected because we are across most councils are guaranteed. Because if you've got a guarantee council, you get a low interest rate and you also can borrow more as well. So there's all sorts of limits with LGFA.
And just to clarify, we are well within our limits within our LGFA and within the TIA.
Right.
We have a relatively low external borrowing.
Yes.
Strong balance sheet.
I just had one more question just about our council debt. So I agree, we seem to be in quite a strong position in terms of our debt position, just having read the report well within borrowing limits. I've just got a question on point 6, the forecast position. It's talking about the forecast, the debt would be 28.8 million. And at the end of 2025, the debt is 25.1 million. So I'm just wondering what caused that discrepancy between forecast and actual debt?
Great question. So timing of projects is one of the things. External grants that we receive, where we do a project and we're able to get external grant funding for it, which means we're not able to borrow for it. And also, when we go through our annual planning process, we reset our opening balances, so the slightly lower interest rates or capital repayments that we've made will reduce our starting position. So we've got a slightly lower starting position at the beginning of the year. We have capital plan that goes out. We delivered on our original budgeted capital plan, we delivered at about 98% of our original budget capital plan. But then there was some additional works that we added in, new projects, Norman Ave, the 1 hour process water, etc. So they expanded our capital budget, but in terms of funding it via debt, we leaned on other sources first. So that would be external funding where we can, that would be depreciation funds or internal reserves that we have, cash balances that we hold, to use those up first. And then the last port of call will be to go and borrow. And so what we found during the year is that we've been able to source additional funds rather than borrow more effectively during that year, mostly through grant funding and depreciation reserves.
Chris,
I just had a question from Mark. At the start of the paper, I think I heard you say we're well within the limits within debt, and we'll have discussions about if that's appropriate going forward. Could you expand on what you mean by that?
It's just I guess our levels and the mix between external, internal.
Yeah.
And our sort of also our term deposits coming through that sort of makes up. Yeah, it's just me getting a feel as to what the current structure is and how is that best placed going forward, really. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions on our Treasury report? No further questions. We've got a recommendation on page 50 that we received the report, and we note that the Treasury position and we're compliant with our policy limits. Do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor Grace. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Steve. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Which councillor, Steve?
Oh no, it's only one councillor Steve on the
It's two Steves.
on the committee.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah,
Councillor Lawrence, but Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
Right?
you're an imposter.
Yeah, no, he can't move or second. All right. All right. Emergency management update.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome.
Commission. Taylor.
Good on, Mr. Chair. Got to go to returning elected members and new members. The Emergency Management Wairarapa Office. I am Simon Taylor and I'm leading that. It's a function that was established on the 1st of July this year to start consolidating more of the emergency management functions for the 3 councils across the Wairarapa. The report in front of you, I'll take it as read, but there are a couple of things I was going to highlight from that. And one of them in the report is talking about the recent severe weather events in late October. That's the 21st, 23rd and 27th, where we had severe gales coming through the Wairarapa. I just wanted to comment that we activated our Emergency Operations Centre on the 2nd of those days. The first, we weren't sure what we were monitoring continually, and we witnessed power failures and trees falling and road closures. So we activated on the Thursday and Friday to provide support to councils and also to external stakeholders. We deal directly with police, FENS and Wellington Free Ambulance, and where road closures occur, we are able to provide them with details of which roads are closed. So if they're going to events, emergency events, they can accommodate around that. We also dealt directly with PowerCo. PowerCo, you normally have around about 20 people available to us. They've brought in 80, and we're continually working through the Tuesday right through to the Sunday to mitigate many of the power failures that had occurred, and a number of them were branches flying off trees, significant sized branches, and taking out power lines. And so I commend PowerCo for the work that they did. In addition to the 80 they had working here, they also brought in another crew of 20 to start replacing them. And as they finished here on the Sunday, they moved up to Tararua, which was then had been hit quite badly. I would also like to just comment that with the activation of our Emergency Operations Centre, we drew resources from the 3 councils, and they performed extremely well in the roles that they had. And this was one of the few times we've been able to go into a real live event as outside of an exercise. And I was impressed with the team. They were quite a strong team, so there should be no surprises there. But this is one of the few times we've actually gone into a live event. So I just wanted to say that, you know, the training that we've been putting our teams through, we are focusing on individuals and providing them with additional support, and through the work Vicky is doing in the personnel team, providing them with a professional pathway for emergency management as well. And that's certainly starting to pay off. At the end of that severe weather events, we're keeping the mayors and the CEs constantly updated, because the mayors were being contacted by media. So it's just to reassure that during a significant event, it's the mayor or the deputy mayor who will be contacted by media. We support and supply them with key messaging for that as well. And that was being supplied through that event, although at that stage, many of the mayors and deputy mayors hadn't actually been sworn in. So it provided us with a slight challenge. And it's one of the few times between events between when we have council elections and the council teams are sworn in, that if we had to declare a state of emergency, we are still able to do so, but we have to escalate direct to the minister because they are the only other elected official available to us. So there are a raft of things in emergency management that we were taking into consideration and just managing and monitoring with the support of our mayors and also CEs. And to just highlight that twice a year we have a major exercise, and the next exercise we are doing is on the 20th of November, next Thursday. That is going to include resources from across the 3 councils. And in this exercise, we've also invited the 3 mayors and deputy mayors to observe what happens in the room, and also to understand when we're giving key messages. We run them through media, like we might do an interview for radio and another one for television. So pretend interviews, but with key messages to give them the experience and the exposure of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to support keeping the community calm, letting them know what they need to do to keep themselves safe and what the latest information is. This is quite an important exercise. The exercise itself, many of the wider teams may not be aware of it, but we're going to simulate an offshore tsunami generated from South America, which is going to be followed as a result of a 9.4 magnitude earthquake, and it'll be a 5-metre tsunami wave that will hit the coast of New Zealand. So this has been generated because of recent tsunami that came down from Russia. And for those who weren't aware, the Chutka earthquake, while it was meant to generate a wave less than 1 metre, it actually hit Northland at 20 centimetres, but it hit the Chatham Islands at 50 centimetres. And the rebound wave of South America hit Chatham's at 75 centimetres a day later. So we're talking about, these are real events that can occur, and they will have a devastating impact on our wider coastline. And for Carterton, that's right down through Flat Point, and of course down and through South Wairarapa and in the north of Wairarapa as well. So it's just to give you some assurance that from an emergency management perspective, we are taking these events seriously, and I'm open to any questions that you might have based on the report. Quite full.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, thanks for, it's got Jerry's name at the bottom of the report. I'm not sure how.
Well, Simon doesn't have access to Info Council to add it to the agenda, so Simon has produced the report. Jerry's not attempting to take credit for it. She added it to the agenda.
Yeah,
and it's a consistent report across the 3 councils.
It's fantastic. I just had a question around Remo Wairarapa and their work plan progress. Yes. It's mentioned in there over the past 3 months what focus has been on. I'm just wondering down the last bullet point, it talks about engaging iwi after school. My question is, it was offering free training. Was that taken up?
It is being taken up, and we're doing continual work with iwi across Wairarapa. And for this exercise, one of the iwi is actually participating in the exercise, and the other iwi will come into the next exercise. What we're doing with iwi is quite different because as a partnership model, we can't task them. It's not appropriate to do that. But what we're trying to do is work with them to say, during a significant event, how can we work together to support sectors of the population? And for the remote team, they're also providing the free training to help them understand how we operate so they can work out how to interact with us as well. And how they operate, we've already gone and talked to them and tried to work out how they operate so we can work out how to engage at the appropriate times. And iwi themselves are very keen and very responsive to, because they do this all the time. You know, they have tangies, they have a number of events that are equivalent of emergency events that they are able to stand up their marae, and they're very open and willing to support us. Perhaps not as community hubs, which are a different concept, or an emergency operations centre, which is council driven, but in another equivalent. And that's what we're working with Remo on, is how do we give them the recognition that they need to support them? Hopefully that's answered your question.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks.
Just sort of on that line, I've read in here, can't find it right now, that it was a marae was being used as a hub in South Wairarapa. But I noted that in Carterton, the Gladstone complex was being used as a hub just down the road from the marae. Was that something that was considered, or it was more appropriate to use the Gladstone facility in this instance?
What you'll find is that this is for the Carterton district you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. The marae that you're talking about cannot cater to the numbers that would potentially be available, but the local sports complex management have, I've talked to them and they've said that they would work closely with the marae because they have the capability of providing food and basic shelter, but perhaps not overnight accommodation. So it's trying to work in with what's available in the community and using that to best effect without imposing on either group.
Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
When we did have our live event over those 2 or 3 days a couple of weeks ago, were there any lessons learned from that? Things that surprised you about how things worked out? Or
one of the learnings, and this may appeal more to rural people, is that if the power goes off in an area and you've got dairy farms there and the cows are not able to be milked for 2 to 3 days, you run the risk of them drying off. Trying to express that back to a significant power provider and the importance of trying to prioritise some of those areas in the population because of that. Now, from a council perspective, we're responsible for welfare of people and also animals. And so we were able to use that to support the information going back to the power company to encourage them to try and prioritise some of these more rural sectors that may not have the thousands of people, but have significant impact on these rural sector populations. And they were very responsive. I must say PowerCo did respond, but they were going to try and bring many of the those rural sectors on as fast as they could. Part of this is also how many communities do not have their own backup generation. And if they do have backup generation through this event, they were very generous and shared it, or they shared a facility for other farmers to milk at their sheds. It's not a surprise, it's just reassuring to know that they can work together. It's just that when you're milking, your power supply may not also be able to reticulate water across the farm, which then means that you now have stock that are unable to access water. So simple learnings from the wider community perspective. From the council perspective, we don't always need 60 people in an emergency operations centre to be effective. And we were working with 12 at that stage for the size of it. But if there were more welfare issues in our region, we would have brought more people in to support that. And one of the areas that we were able to support in welfare is for those people who've been without power for 3 days. We were offering showers and an ability to charge devices. Now, we were doing that through the Marston swimming pool complex because we knew that they were open 7 days and could be available to anybody. But in a wider event, we'd probably look at other facilities as well.
So just following on from that, you mentioned about, PowerCo's responding really well to that, and that's great to hear. But commercial operators like the dairy farms and all that do need to learn themselves about providing resilience, because I did read of one that was on the news the other night, that they had within a month prior put in a solar and battery system and were unaffected. So I'm hoping that either with a diesel generator or solar and battery, that individual farms take responsibility themselves to be resilient and not just rely on PowerCo to get there faster.
And I saw the same set of interviews, And I was actually heartened with seeing that. And also many of the farmers are trying to improve their resiliency. And also from the same interview, they were talking about perhaps they're getting a better payout and they might refocus some of the direction of that into resiliency work.
And also, they've got access to an ASB loan that's interest-free for several years to put solar on, so they should take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think there's opportunities, and wherever we can, we encourage. And we also, you'll have seen through here, we have an EECA grant for the Wairarapa that they are willing to invest into solar, into some of our community facilities that would support our communities during times of distress as well. And so that's another mechanism that we're using. But wherever we can, we are spreading that message of, resiliency. You need to set yourselves up for 3 to 7 days at least, that there is no official response. Because if it is significant enough, we're going to have troubles trying to get to everybody.
I think it feeds into some of the questions which aren't really settled yet around private responsibility versus council or government responsibility for weather events or climate change events. And but yeah, I agree.
We have to encourage private.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of the dairy farms in the South Island were out for a couple of weeks. And, you're absolutely right, Jane. It comes back to the question of we're going to privatise the profits and socialise the costs. So, that's a question that we have to manage through emergency management. Simon's providing a coordination response as opposed to, here's our generator, go and milk the cows, which is great. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Simon, for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We've got a recommendation on page 59 that we received the report. Do I have a mover? Yes, Steve. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Grace. Although any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against carried.
So you're welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. Next item 6.6, delegations manual stuff on page 60.
Got a chair.
This was a dairy report now.
For the new councillors, a review of the delegations manual is a function that this committee undertakes. We review the delegations manual on a regular basis. It covers delegations from council to management for things that council are responsible for. It also incorporates delegations from legislation that go to the CEO and the CEO delegates to the staff. Some legislation, Resource Management Act legislation, delegates directly to the CEO to deliver functions, and I can subdelegate those functions down to the staff. So yeah, financial delegations, authority delegations, and legislative, covering things like spatial planning and issuing subdivision notices and animal control and that kind of. I have a couple of notes, but happy to take questions.
Okay. Questions? Thank you, Councillor Grace.
I had a couple of questions. I wasn't at the June meeting and it was looked at last time, so I read through everything. One of the questions, and you just sparked another one, the sub-delegate. Is there any scope within that you have the right to sub-delegate to any level within the business unit, or is there I know you have your staff in different brackets. Is there a certain level that you can go down to, or it's your choice to see where?
So where it's a delegation to the chief executive, I can delegate to anyone within the organisation. I prefer to operate on a 50% type structure. So if I have the delegation of $100, then any manager should be able to sub-delegate at least half of that to their team, so $50. But where we have an acting up position, so somebody is acting as chief executive or CFO, they would have the full delegation.
Yeah.
We'll operate on.
And I had a couple of with regards to the unplanned expenditure categories. Capital expenditure emergency works. The question I had for you, Jeff, was with regards to what defines it as an emergency for that $50,000 threshold. Is it when there is a civil defence sort of emergency and there's lives at risk, or is it the event centre roof situation and you can then spend that 50 without council's permission?
Prior
approval, yeah.
I think the word emergency is probably something that we could clarify under Simon. The word emergency means something quite different. So it means, the immediate threat to life or property or animals. Whereas under emergency with council, it probably is more around timing of ability to get approval between council meetings. So I'm happy to change the word emergency. I think it's a fair point that we should be talking about. There is either a delegation to go outside of budget and how much that delegation is, rather than when that delegation should be used. I think that additional restriction is quite difficult to articulate in a policy.
Yeah, and so with regards to the other point was the other unplanned work that you have this $10,000 delegation that you're allowed to work within. As we discussed this morning, I just wonder if there's a way that our council, obviously with this committee and then through to council, if there's a change to the policy that we could make where we increase your delegation but have increased oversight of where that is being spent. So there's a report that comes back to the committee through the finance team where we see when there is this $10,000 sort of limit being used and where it's being used. Because I think greater oversight means that we then have an increased level of ability to let you do what you need to do in your role.
I think that makes a great deal of sense. Where a power is exercised, there should be at least some kind of reporting that power has been exercised back to council.
Jeff, and just for clarity for the newer elected representatives, when do we get to look over these facts and figures and look to increase them, decrease them?
I think there's a recommendation from Risk and Insurance Committee to Policy and Projects, and I think it goes to Policy and Projects for adoption.
Yep.
So that's where you would get to make changes and amendments. I would also, I had a couple of comments. There are a couple of tweaks within some of the Resource Management Act delegations that have occurred as a function. We had a joint role. We split it into GM Infrastructure, GM Regulatory and Planning. And we've allowed, I think, way down in the document, page. Anyhow, the challenge it provides for both roles to now issue subdivision consent notices, and that wasn't the intention. So I just need to clarify some of the roles within the RMA. They are role specific rather than. I will do that for Policy and Projects.
Just on this, I've got some questions, but I'll hear from other people. I think for our newly elected members, the delegations is actually really important internal control, and we need to, and it's part of our oversight to make sure that there are appropriate and effective delegations. So it's really important, and it's good to see the council getting 2 bites at the cherry. So it's basically coming to risk insurance first for us to put over a risk lens and our assurance lens, and then for council to say from an operational perspective, is this really working? So any other questions or comments on the delegations?
I just had a question about point 5, the proposed changes. Addition of a new customer services team leader position authorised for financial delegations. I just wasn't clear whether, is that a new position that council has, is that a new actual job, or is it just a new delegation?
This is a great question. We have not had a team leader customer services. So we had a role of individual in the role of customer services, and they've taken another role within council to pick up a rates function. The role that we replaced, we upgraded slightly to put a more senior person in that role. So we previously, it would have been called customer services individual, and now they're team leader customer services. So we didn't have the title in our delegations manual. So we're adding that new role. It's not like we've added a new person. We've just changed the role title.
Any other questions or comments? Just a comment. I think my experience is, since it's a comment only to the council to consider, I think 10,000 might be a little bit low in terms of spending for unanticipated budget items. But to me, it needs to come with a condition. One of the conditions is that the chief executive can spend more, right? However, he needs to make sure that the funds are available, right? And it also agreeing with Deputy Mayor Grace that there is a report back process. I think that, to me, we're about efficient and effective local authorities. So to me, $10,000 probably hasn't been changed for quite some time. But that's just a comment I make. The other one I think is probably almost a typo in the report. It talks about on page 77, it's got write-offs, including additional water usage accounts. It's got a tick beside council. That probably should be the CE, because it's a $5,000 to $10,000. That means if it's not above, if council can't do it, nobody can do it. So I think that probably needs to be slid across the column when it comes back.
I recall we had a slightly lower water write-offs because we were having challenges with some ratepayers, and I think at the time council wanted the water write-offs to come up to council. As I said to the mayor and deputy mayor this morning, my view is $10,000 is $10,000. If I've got delegation for unauthorised expenditure on $10,000 worth of consultants, it's no different to the ratepayer if I write off $10,000 worth of water. It's still $10,000. So perhaps we could align those two.
But I think it should be aligned. Recommending it be aligned. Are there any other comments or questions?
Just probably a silly question. Council doesn't need a financial delegation to have an unlimited access to anything because we're the council, right? So we don't need to be listed.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You can do what you like, providing it's legal.
Yeah. Very good.
And you're open to receive the appropriate advice. But tongue in cheek. But no, it has happened. All right.
Before you move to the recommendations, I probably just wanted to seek feedback from the council on what the proposed change to the $10,000.
That's what I was going to do. So yes, very happy. My suggestion, if I can, would be it moved to $10,000, so 20,000, right? On the basis that the funding, right, that the funding for that expenditure be identified before the expenditure has occurred.
What's he mean by that?
So, okay.
So check the bank account to see if the check's
No. So, right. So basically what happens, I'm looking to Mark, every bit of expenditure, from a bean counter perspective, we've got to say where are we actually taking that money from, right? So we can say is we might have a general reserve, or we might be able to say we need to take it from, and I'm going to be really naughty here, right? Solitaire hasn't spent all her budget, right? So we're going to take 10, 15,000 from her budget, and I'm getting the evil look at the moment, right? And give it to Mark, right? That's what we actually mean, right? It's not new money. So he's actually identifying where it's coming from. Council, I assume, has got some small reserves, and it might be says we're going to identify, someone's got to save some money by the end of the year, so we actually come in on budget as part of that process. But that's the first leg. The second leg is also then as Grace has talked about, it's actually reported back to council what it was spent for and where it was actually come from. That Solitaire has very graciously given up 15,000 of a consultancy budget. Just as an example, right? That's the sort of thing. Or we've got a reserve, we've got some money left over from last year that we didn't spend it, that we're going to use that. That's what we actually mean by our funding source.
How much visibility do we have of this as councillors?
So if the recommendation goes through that I support what Grace has suggested, you'll have 100% because you will actually be receiving after the event, it will be reported to council. So you won't get visibility at the time, but the issue is it's because you need actually to get on and do the business. So we don't want to call it extraordinary meeting just to approve. $15,000 seems a little bit. So from a visibility perspective, it actually enables you as elected members to two things: monitor how much is being spent, identify is the 15,000, 20,000 appropriate, and that there's the right processes in place, and then you can review it to say, oh, right, we're getting all these little ones, and it's too much, or 20,000 is appropriate.
I guess in reality, no one has enough money.
No. Yeah, and the other, and I'm not recommending it, but council may want to consider that I have seen it elsewhere, that the chief executive together with the mayor have a greater authority as well. So, for example, that you might actually leave it at $10,000, but right, might.
She's thrilled.
Yeah, I know. But together with the mayor, it might be 30,000. Right? And I'm not going to put it. I'm just throwing those as suggestions for council to consider.
So that was going to be my question to Jeff, and I would like to just understand. We're looking at changing the $10,000, which I agree with. I think it's too low. Changing it to $20,000. Should we just be making it $50,000 because it's all being brought back to us in transparent manner anyway? So I mean, this is a conversation for.
It's a conversation not from me. I've thrown my suggestion.
Yeah.
It's up for the council, and may I make a suggestion as the chief executive, right? That and the committee that we actually recommend that when it comes back to
Policy and
projects,
policy and projects, that you bring a mechanism to that committee about how it would, how and why. Otherwise, 1, 2 is
Subjective. It's
a subject to.
well, I think 10's too low. I think 100's too high. I
Yeah.
think it's very subjective.
Yeah.
I think mechanism on, proportion of rates. So
Yeah.
we've spoken previously, returning councillors will know we've spoken about, in OPEX, 1% of rates is roughly $200,000. And CapEx is roughly $2 million. So, when you consider things like that, a $10,000 limit is, 0.02% or 0.05% of rates. And, when you look at it like that, you can have some understanding as to the impact or the consequence of an unbudgeted expenditure item on the thing that is most important, rates.
Another question, because I agree with what the Minister just said, that a higher limit, and I quite like the idea of there being a sign off on a significantly higher limit. I think that makes sense. With regards to, now I've just lost my train of thought. Jeff's comment just signaled something.
Capital versus OPEX?
Yeah, and a 1%. So if we take it to policy and projects, that's where we'll have the recommendation that will give some information behind our pie in the sky, sort of pulling a number out, sort of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
But I think the authority will need to go back to council.
Yeah.
Because policy and projects don't have delegated authority to approve budget.
Yeah.
I think what they, I think that budget's got to go back to council. So if there's unapproved expenditure, my thinking is the reporting of that should go back to council.
No, my train of thought back as well. The other aspect was you've said that it's with regards to this unbudgeted expenditure sort of moving beans within different pots.
Yep.
At what point does Jeff have the ability to say the pot is needing extending for this purpose? Is that when he has to come to council and do the unbudgeted expenditure? That's never, okay.
Yep.
That's nice and clear.
We did that a couple of times last year with Norman Ave. So we drew down from a reserve and did the Norman Ave extension. Same with Wainawa process water. So that's where we would come back and say we now need a new budget.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
And just following on from what Jeff has said, I would actually see two different amounts. One is for capital. For example, you're doing a capital project and the tender, you've budgeted $2 million and the project comes in through the tender process. It becomes at 2.1, you're borrowing 100%, right? Of it, therefore you might be $100,000 over, right? That should be a different conversation than $100,000 of OPEX because of what Jeff has said. The impact on the ratepayer of $100,000 of OPEX is significant more than $100,000 of loan repayment.
Yeah.
We may want to align that with my KPIs as well. Where we have that, you know, sort of a variance within the.
Yeah.
Don't know, just some thinking.
Yeah. So, any further discussion on that? I don't think we probably. So, if we move to the recommendation on page 62, you may want to tweak that a little bit. I think this works really well. Some doesn't.
I think I've got some notes. We're just noting that it will come up to projects and policy for final adoption.
Okay, so we're going to receive the report. We note the current delegations, right?
Yeah.
What we're saying is, through we endorse recommendations. So therefore that's what we've talked about, and and the chief executive has got some notes. Therefore, we don't need to tweak the recommendations. All right. In that case, do I have a mover for the recommendation?
All three.
Sorry,
all three.
All three together. Mayor Steve, do I have a seconder? Councillor Steve Lawrence for completeness. All right. All those, any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Health, next item, page 93, Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report.
With permission, invite to join us.
Thank you. Take the report. I assume you
I'd like to take it as read. Yes.
take it as read. No, you had a little bit of significant input into this, I would imagine.
Actually, Jodie, my colleague, our health and safety and wellbeing advisor, put this report together.
Okay.
So thanks to Jodie. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Lead off.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. I just have one question, and it's around perception, and it's under the staff policies and the substance and alcohol abuse policy.
Yep.
I'm all for bringing things back in house and cost saving where we possibly can, but it's just what could be put in place or what is in place to ensure that there's not a perception from the public that we are now doing this testing in house and we could be in conflict with ourselves. So is there?
Yeah, good.
I had some thoughts on that, Vicky, because you are undertaking the testing.
Yes.
And I thought I'd just talk council through the process first.
Sure.
That the process we go through when we get a not negative test, and how often always the not negative test goes away.
That has to go away.
Further testing. So the benefit of having Vicky do the test is where it comes up as negative. And we've saved a whole lot of external time and cost by having someone, either two people, go up and have that tested, but because Vicky is able to do it. But I think the council looking for assurance around, so what happens if it's, if it's actually Vicky's staff member who's being tested and there is a perception of conflict of interest, and how do we manage that?
That's a good question. So I think, well, first of all, the qualification is a formal one. And I have to follow a certain process. So, but I guess the public don't understand that or necessarily know that. So it's probably something we need to give some further thought to as to how we get that. I guess it's not more transparency, but it's more confidence, isn't it? You're looking for what that perception might be. Yes, I'd have to give that some more thought as to how we do that.
Perhaps one of the ways we could do with the process is that there is a follow-up sign-off from Vicky's manager on the results after they've been done, so that if there is any perception of conflict of interest, then Jerry, Vicky's manager, would be able to look at it and say, actually, no, I want a further test undertaken. So that provides some protection to Vicky, that she hasn't made a judgment decision that says, you're my best friend, I'm going to do the test. And there is some independence, or that there is some managerial oversight on that.
Well, we could have, another alternative might be to have a witness in the room as well, but that would be another member of council, so we'd have to have permission to do that from the person getting tested, because it is a confidential process. It's only oral swabbing, so it's too invasive. I am qualified in urine testing as well, but I don't really want to do that. So we could certainly do that. I don't know if that answers your question, or if there's something else you think we could do also.
Yeah, I understand it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
But I think the community will be supportive of us bringing something in-house where we're cost saving.
Yeah.
In that way, it's just there are people out there who
Absolutely
will look at it as a conflict.
Yeah. So is that something that we need to look at further, or just note, or
I'm happy to take an action just to provide protection for Vicky and council where we're undertaking tasks like this.
Yeah.
Thank you. You?
And just on that, that cost saving, it's not just the time saving from having to go up to the tester in Norfolk Road. It's $250 to test up there, and it's under $50 to do it in-house. So
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. We're saving ratepayers money for a change.
Yep.
We do it all the time.
Thank you, Steve, for campaigning. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and I just think I'd make the comment that I feel reassured by the fact that if there is a concern with the test, it then goes to someone external. So all we're doing is saving money in the short term with the not negatives.
Yeah.
And then if there's actually with the not negative. Yes.
Negative. Yeah.
And if there is a question mark, it then goes to someone outside of council. I just think it seems like a smart way. And if it's $250 compared to $50, it's do us
travel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. We can also take a photo of the test. It's not necessarily very clear, the lines on it, but it may come up in a photo. So Jodie and I'll have a look at that as well. We can record that.
Not the puddle.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Too much information. Move on.
Yeah.
Right. You said she wasn't right. It was only the swabs. Right. Move on. Anything else? Any other questions?
Just reading about speeding offences. I assume that where an offence has resulted in a ticket, that the staff member involved pays the ticket.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't had any of those recently that I know of, but our goal is to bring that down to that report as there's nothing on it. So we're seeking to reduce that.
Now that I think when people know that the speed is being monitored, they behave a lot better.
And if there are consequences, that's why we've given out a couple of warnings, because there have to be consequences for actions. Yeah.
Sometimes there's just ingrained behaviour of, it's my road, it's my street, So yeah, sometimes there's ingrained behaviour. The other challenge we did find was just before this triennium was there was changes to the state highway speed limits, and our GPS wasn't updated for a while, particularly in front of Cleveland.
So it wasn't reporting a speed excess.
Well, it was reporting a speed excess, but in actual fact, the speed had changed on the state highways.
Yeah.
All right. Any good report? Thank you, team. All right. No further discussion. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor James. Seconded. I'll second. All those. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Can I have a mover? Before we move into public excluded, we've been going for almost 2 hours, but can I suggest that we just, rather than take a break, we deal with push on?
Yeah.
All right. So can I have a mover? We move to public excluded. Mayor Steve, do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Grace. All those in favour, please say aye. Next item, the star. It's too quick.
Recording.
It's too quick.